Hi, Alistair Weaver here for Edmunds with a very simple concept. We've brought the Tesla Model 3 Performance, the Hyundai Ioniq 5N and the updated Mustang Mach-E GT to the Edmunds test track to find out which is best. We're going to run the numbers, we're going to drive them hard, we're going to perform the world-famous Edmunds EV range test, and we're going to find out whether they fit the family. So settle back, grab a glass and discover which is the funnest EV on sale today. Let's start with the numbers. All three cars proved seriously rapid in our testing. The Tesla doesn't quite creep into the 2-second club, but 0 to 60 in 3 seconds dead is still extraordinary for a compact sedan, costing less than 60 grand. And keyboard warriors, it returns those numbers whether you're in track or insane mode. The Hyundai is only a little behind at 3.3 seconds for 0 to 60, with the Ford bringing up the rear at 3.7 seconds. The Ford also takes the furthest to stop from 60 miles an hour and has the least grip. The Hyundai's 1.0 G of lateral acceleration just tops the Tesla. On the world-famous Edmunds EV range test, the Model 3 outperformed both its rivals. The Hyundai has the least range here at 253 miles, a rare loss in our comparison. So, we know that the Model 3 is searingly fast in a straight line, but how does it perform on the circuit? Is it genuinely fun to drive? And there was a time when some of the early Teslas were very fast, but not necessarily the most entertaining. So, this Model 3 seeks to put all of that right. Now, we've already done a fully tested video of this car produced by the superb Brian Wong. But this is the first time we've had all three cars together at the track, being able to compare them side by side. So I've set it up in track mode, stability control to you and I, that's in minimal. Regenerative braking is at 100%. Handling balance, it says here, is neutral. So I'm going to start here, then I'm also going to switch it at some point into drift mode, which gives me more of an oversteer balance. That's more likely to kick the tail out under cornering and turns the stability control all the way off. So in theory, it should let me dance around a little bit. So turning in, the Tesla has a natural tendency just to understeer for the nose to push a little bit, but you can adjust it on the throttle, by which I mean if you just lift a little bit as the car starts to load up, it will tuck its nose in and ease the tail around, which is a good hallmark of any car that's been nicely set up. Yeah, you can see I have an initial tendency for the nose to push. I can lift off the throttle a little bit, it adjusts its line. That's good to feel, good to see. Brakes are nice and positive, turn it in. Actually, a little bit of push when we carried a bit too much speed in. Hard on the power, you can see, just wants to kick the tail a little bit. Very much under control, very much linear and progressive. Now this steering, Tesla's always had very, very sharp turning, by which I mean that I turn the steering a little bit and you get an instantaneous response. That's always been part of their appeal. I've actually got a little dial here on the screen which is telling me how hot the brakes are getting. If I lean on the power here, you can see it wants to oversteer a little bit, which is kind of fun. It moves around quite a lot. I think this is a fun setup. In some ways I'd still like a little bit more brake, particularly when they get hot. This is something that we discovered in Edmunds U-Drags as well. When the brakes get hot, they do start to lose performance. Of course, no carbon ceramic discs at this price point, very much traditional steel rotors, and I can see looking at display here that the brakes are already very hot and you can actually start to feel them go away a little bit. I mean, this is undeniably fun, and what I enjoy about it is there's a lot more adjustability than there were in early Model 3. So understeering a bit, hard on the power, and a little whack of oversteer just for the entertainment value. Okay, before I come back, I'm going to try one little thing here. I'm going to turn it into drift preset. Now, this has turned the stability control all the way off, and according to this little slider here, this has now set up the handling balance for oversteer. That's to encourage the rear to slide. So let's see what difference that makes. Hard on the brakes, get it stopped. Turn into the trail brake in the entrance. Woo! Okay, it oversteers. So you can immediately feel the difference there. The tyres are hot, so it's starting to move a little bit, but instantly you could feel that back end wanting to come around. But again, nice and progressive, it's not in any way scary. Woo! But there is stability control. You could probably feel it there once we hit a certain slip angle. Then the stability control came in and said, your ego is writing checks that your talent can't cash. Let's turn it in. Feel it immediately, just feeling wanting to oversteer. It's really good fun. Great day to be alive. Of course, this is also billed as an everyday car, and on the road the ride quality is much better than some of the early Model 3s, even in this performance edition. That's the value of the electronic damping. This is actually a pretty comfortable everyday proposition, and Tesla's got so good now at playing with the software, so when you want to go nuts on a circuit like we have been here, then it really does turn into a pretty fun machine. It's so much better than the Model Y performance around here, and that just talks to how much better Tesla's got at manipulating the software. But is it more fun than the Mustang Mach-E Performance, recently updated of course, and is it more fun than the perennial Edmunds favourite, the Ioniq 5N? Well, let's swap to the Mustang and find out. So here we go, Mustang Mach-E GT with the performance upgrade, and Ford has changed quite a lot for this updated version. We've got Brembo front brakes, we've got a revised rear motor, we've got magnetic damping, all to try and keep this car up to date against newcomers like the Ioniq 5N and the Model 3 Performance. Of course, it has 700 pounds-feet of torque, which is by far the most of our trio. But in all honesty, out here, it doesn't feel that fast. It feels more SUV-like than the other two. As you can see, I sort of sit higher, I've got more body roll, it just feels heavier, and of course it is heavier, but it does a less good job of disguising its weight than the Hyundai does. I'm in fully unbridled mode, which in theory gives me more control on the track, and it means I actually have to use the brakes rather than relying on so-called one-pedal driving, where the car does most of the regen and the speed retardation for you. What I can't do in this car is fully turn off all the stability control. It still retains a little bit. Just get a little bit of push back on the power, back on the power. You can feel the stability control kicking in, trying to deal with all that torque being fed through the two motors. It doesn't have the adjustability of the Tesla. As you lift on the throttle, it doesn't sort of tuck the nose in the same way, and what you can't do is then tease the rear out by getting hard back on the power. What I quite like about this mode is that you drive it more like you would an ICE car. There's a much more sort of consistency through the brake pedal because you're the one responsible for the retardation. And this has always been the kind of problem with the Mach-E. We like the Mach-E, it is a nice road car, but the GT has never felt special enough to justify all the extra expense. And unfortunately, out here on the circuit, this feels like a sort of faster version of the standard car rather than a kind of road racer like the Tesla. It just doesn't feel differentiated enough from the lesser models. To be honest, it doesn't feel as aggressive, as performance orientated as the ICE Mustang either. A little bit later on the brakes there, and it comes. It's not that it's not capable, it just doesn't give you the level of control as the Tesla. It just doesn't feel as fun. It just feels a little bit more leaden, a little bit more wooden, if you like. The other thing I should say about the Mustang Mach-E compared to both the Ioniq 5 and the Model 3 Performance is it doesn't have a drift mode. And if such things matter to you, then that's a big mark against the Ford. On our low grip surface, both the Hyundai and the Tesla will happily go sideways all day. This car, not so much, but it is a nice road car, and I spent the last week driving this car on the road. The ride quality, perhaps firmer than the standard Mach-E, but it's never uncomfortable. It's a nice family car, but then you can say that of the standard Mach-E. What you got to ask with the GT is, why am I paying the extra money? And that's where this car, at least on a circuit, starts to let itself down. It just doesn't feel different enough. Okay, so into the Hyundai Ioniq 5N, and instantly this feels the most sporting of the trio. The seats are more supportive, the wheel is somewhat eccentric, and the whole digital display changes to give you that sense of excitement that you're in something a bit special, and honestly, I like that. Now, I already did a fully tested film all about this Ioniq 5N, which I would encourage you to watch at your leisure, but here we're going to focus on the comparison with the other cars and give you the snapshot of what it feels like out here on the track. Now, if you're a regular watcher of Edmunds U-Drags, and if not Why not? You'll remember that this NGB button actually makes a really big difference when you're on the straightaway. This is a much heavier car than the Tesla. It's a full 800 pounds heavier. It's just a bigger machine overall, physically bigger, heavier, more powerful, but it actually does a pretty good job of disguising all that mass. And the engineering team responsible, I know some of them personally, and they are big fans of rallying and the legendary 1980s Group B rally era, and this car is imbued with a lot of that spirit. It's brutally fast in a straight line, of course, but it also handles really, really well. You get a bit less body roll than you do in the Tesla. It handles very, very flat. The brakes are good, and then you do get that little bit of push, which, let's face it, you do in every road car, and that's kind of reassuring. Changes direction nicely, a little bit of body roll. That is a little bit of push. Stability control still kicking in a little bit. It does feel heavier than the Tesla. It doesn't feel quite as lithe, quite as agile. You can't ultimately overpower the laws of physics, but it is undeniably fun. Last time I drove this car, I described it the most fun I'd ever had in an EV, and I guess that's what we're here to work out today. Does it still retain that crown? I'm in the fully stiff suspension setting, and as you can see, even on a track, that does feel pretty hardcore on the road. You very much want to turn that off. And to be fair to the Hyundai, if you change all the settings, tune it down so that you soften off the suspension and you reduce everything down, it feels a lot like a normal Ioniq 5. So you can use these N buttons here on the steering wheel. You can have one for the track here, which is like the full nutter mode, and then another for the school run. It really feels like the software people very much in tune with the traditional test engineers, and that really shines through in this car, and I think that's the key to its success. Let's take a breath for a moment and consider each of these cars. This Ioniq 5N is far from subtle, even if you choose a more demure colour scheme than this lurid orange paint job. They call it an SUV, but to be honest, it's more of a kind of hot hatchback in the vibe of the 1980s, although scaled up a little bit. The Ford, on the other hand, is much more of a sleeper. This car has a $2,000 bronze package, which includes some really rather cool alloy wheels and a bit of extra badging. But if you want a more extrovert Mach-E, then you need to pay $5 grand more for the rally version, which is tuned for the dirt, but to my eyes at least, looks way, way cooler. The Model 3 is also something of a sleeper, but I think they've done just enough with this redesigned chin, the chunky alloy wheels, and that rather cute carbon fiber lip spoiler on the trunk to differentiate it from the standard car. Overall, this latest Model 3 is really just a clever evolution of the 2017 original. Still think it looks great. Now you might be thinking, why don't we have the Model Y here? Because as an SUV, it lines up more obviously with the Mach-E and the Ioniq 5N. And the answer is because the Model Y is yet to be updated. We expect to see that car arriving later next year. In the here and now, it's the Model 3 that is the best expression of Tesla. Rather like the exterior, the interior of the Ioniq 5N is more extrovert than the others. There's a certain sort of joie de vivre that the other two lack. I love these heavily bolstered, super supportive seats, and this pretty eccentric steering wheel, complete with the NGB, that's N-Grin boost mode, gives you extra power for up to 10 seconds. If you delve into the menu system, then frankly the N functions require a degree in computer science to work them all out. It is super complex, but thankfully there are a couple of N buttons here on the steering wheel, which you can kind of set up and leave. So I have one set up for the school run, which pretty much turns it into a normal Ioniq 5, and one for the track, which gives it the full Monty and allows you to do this. Oh yes. As you can see, there is tons of room in the back of an Ioniq 5. I'm 6'4", this is set up for me, and there's still loads and loads of space. Both headroom and legroom are exceptionally generous. A couple of other things I like: you can actually slide this seat backwards and forwards to maximize the luggage space, and you can recline the seat for those quiet, intimate moments. The Hyundai has the second biggest trunk of our trio behind the Mustang Mach-E, and as you can see, it's well shaped and you have decent practicality from the hatchback tailgate. But what it doesn't have, unlike the Tesla, is a front. You do get sports seats as standard now in the GT, and there's a bit of Alcantara on the dashboard, but beyond that, there's not that much in here to make it feel special, certainly compared to the Ioniq 5N. If we delve into the software, we have 3 different modes: Whisper, Engage, and Unbridle, and then an Unbridle Extended, which is designed very much for track use. Not quite sure in horsey terms what unbridled extended means, but in theory at least, it's a sort of track mode. But there is one thing about this car which really grates on me, and forgive me a little rant. You have to spend an extra $995 to unleash its full performance. It's called Performance Upgrade, and it's actually fitted to this car. So what Ford's basically saying is, give us 60,000 bucks, then we're going to hold back the car's performance until you pay $995 for a bit of extra software, comes as an over-the-air update, and then we'll give you the full GT impact. Honestly, it's irritating, it's wrong, I'm offended, please don't do it again. There's plenty of headroom in the back of the Mach-E, but as you can see, knee room is relatively compromised compared to the Hyundai, and that might be something to do with these chunky front chairs. And these rear seats neither recline nor slide, so it's very much Advantage Ioniq. The Mach-E has the largest trunk here by a full 3.5 cubic feet, and it's supplemented by a front trunk, or frunk if you prefer, which isn't quite as big as the Tesla's, but is still pretty usable. Inside, the Tesla's sleeper vibe continues. In fact, the aesthetics haven't really changed since the 2017 original, but the quality and the refinement most definitely have. Changes to the performance, well, they're pretty minimal. You get these chunky seats which look great but aren't quite as supportive as you might think. I do really like this faux carbon fiber blade that sort of spans the top of the fascia. You also get new software. If I dial up dynamic mode, I can then select track. There we go, which gives me a whole bunch of information about brake temperatures, motor temperatures, battery temperatures, and also allows me to choose between settings that are for the track or drift, which emphasizes oversteer, letting the rear end kick out and slide around, which is awesome fun in the right conditions. You can probably hear it's actually turned on the fans to cool the battery, ready for some hardcore action. Welcome to the biggest drawback of the Tesla Model 3. As you can see, there's not a lot of room here. There's just about enough headroom, although I used to own a Model 3 and believe me, this glass gets hot. But as you can see, knee room is super tight and my knees are kind of up around my ears at the same time. It does score a bonus point though for being the only vehicle here in which you can watch TV, even if you have to kind of risk a groin strain to see the screen. Of course, the Model 3 is the only car here that's a sedan, not an SUV. Of course, that means giving away a bit of versatility, but the trunk is big, the rear seats fall flat, and it's supplemented by a giant, what would you call it, box and usable versatile front trunk. So to the conclusion, and sadly in this three-way competition there is a clear third place. It's perhaps a sign of just how fast technology is developing in the EV market that the Mustang Mach-E, despite its updates, is still starting to show its age, and at least in GT guys, just doesn't quite cut it in such illustrious company. We've always been big fans of the Mach-E at Edmunds, but if we were choosing one today, we'd either pay a bit more for the extrovert rally, or we'd save our cash and buy a more humble version, particularly because some really good deals going at the moment. So where does that leave us? Well, both these cars scored a remarkable 8.4 in the fabled Edmunds rating, and splitting them is really, really difficult. On the one hand, the Model 3 is marginally faster in a straight line. It travels further on a single charge. It's cheaper, and it has access to the best charging infrastructure in the US. Looks good, and it's fantastic to drive. But the Ioniq 5N is more practical, particularly if you value rear seat space, and it's more engaging. Let's face it, you buy any of these cars because you want an emotive purchase. You pay more for them than you would for their humble brethren because they're more fun. And that's why, by the narrowest of margins, we're giving the nod to the Ioniq 5N. Thanks for watching. If you like what you've seen, be sure to like and subscribe. Head to edmunds.com for all your car shopping needs. We'll even make you a cash offer for your existing vehicle. Follow us on social. Be nice to your mum, nice to your dad, nice to your gran, and everything else. Thanks for watching. See you for now.